I know you clicked on this trying to hear about the drama between Apple and OpenAI. I got Apple in the knockout. Who you got?
So now, one important thing before we begin, everything that we're going to talk about discusses Apple's lawsuit, and these are just allegations as of right now. So this isn't fact or anything like that. This is just what Apple's saying is happening and what the lawsuit is entailing between Apple and OpenAI, because this lawsuit includes a ton of craziness, including allegations of secret prototypes, engineering documents, interview tactics, supplier relations, and even employees allegedly downloading confidential files after they had already left Apple, so then OpenAI could take those and then build their own hardware division that isn't technically copying iPhones or Apple's hardware, but a lot of secrets that Apple's been holding on to for years.
You know, the part that got me really curious is that Apple been having a partnership with OpenAI since like 2024. They utilize ChatGPT with Siri, and ChatGPT takes on tasks that Siri can't fulfill. And I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me that Apple was heavily dependent on OpenAI, so that way, you know, they can make Siri better. But now that they got this going on, I wonder who Apple's gonna use to keep Siri intact. Because without ChatGPT, Siri's not it. I'll tell you guys that.
Now, this is not a patent lawsuit for people that are confused about it. A patent lawsuit is when you create something in public and have a patent on it, and then somebody infringes on that patent during the patent time. This is actually about trade secrets and information that was never actually public.
One thing I know about OpenAI is that they're not profitable. They're spending more money than they make. And that's the problem. Because when it comes to partnerships like with Apple, the amount of money that they get from that partnership doesn't cover the cost that they spend. They spend a significant amount of money. And when it comes to being possibly accused of stealing information, secret information, so they can build a hardware and sell that hardware to make profit, that probably won't be enough. The only way it's gonna be enough is that if you keep track of what's coming in and what's coming out. And if you don't keep track of that, it could place you in compromising situations doing questionable things. Supposedly. I don't wanna get sued.
Now, some examples of those trade secrets are manufacturing techniques, engineering documents, supplier relations like I mentioned, product roadmaps, internal testing, and even some unreleased hardware. And Apple says that that's all the things that were stolen. Apple is alleging that former Apple employees joined OpenAI. They improperly took confidential. OpenAI then encouraged the former Apple employees and even gave them some sort of incentive to do so. And that information was used to accelerate OpenAI's hardware implementation and all their ambitions.
Now, I don't know if OpenAI did it or didn't, but I'm assessing the matter solely based off these accusations. So let's look at the motive first. OpenAI is trying to accelerate its hardware efforts, its hardware production. Now let's say they hypothetically did it because of the reason I just gave. It wouldn't be financially feasible because you would spend a significant amount of money trying to defend yourself against these accusations had you just gone to Apple and been like, yo guys, we're trying to build some hardware with our software. Any tips and tricks? You know, any guide maps y'all can give us to get us started? That would have been a much better thing to do than simply stealing.
And now, if you guys do remember a few months back, that whole thing that happened between Jony Ive and Sam Altman and OpenAI, OpenAI acquired Jony Ive's company called Startup.io, and it was a $6.5 billion acquisition. And again, my ears kind of perked up there because I thought it was a little bit weird that Jony Ive went over there to a company that has zero hardware products when Jony Ive was known for being a product-first individual. And I think that's what OpenAI was trying to do, because OpenAI is known as a ChatGPT chatbot pretty much in its totality. That's their product, that's their software, that's their service. And OpenAI does have bigger ambitions from a hardware standpoint, but again, they wanted to take whatever Apple was doing, and that's why they poached nearly 400 total former Apple employees over to OpenAI.
Dang guys, Jony Ive? I've been knowing Jony Ive since I was like 14. And if you know anything about Jony Ive, he's the main reason why the iPhone looks the way that it looks. I'm not even shocked about the poaching over 400 former Apple employees. What I am shocked about is Jony Ive. Because the reality is, by OpenAI buying Jony Ive's company, it seems to me that they want to utilize his experience so he could spearhead their hardware production. Almost like become a navigator. Oh no, guys, don't do this, do that. To create hardware for ChatGPT, or OpenAI in this case.
And while he didn't poach Jony Ive, he was already not part of Apple, it was still a big one because he's a big name associated with Apple. But now you're probably telling yourself there's nothing wrong or illegal about hiring other companies or competitors' employees, but it's what they did with those employees that Apple is starting to sue over. The first big red flag here is that OpenAI was telling these former Apple employees, not even after they're hired, this is during the interview process, they were asking these employees to bring bring anything Apple related from a hardware standpoint.
I have no idea what's going on with Apple for 400 of their former employees to be a part of this situation. But it seems almost like there's like pressure. It's like, I'm the employee, I want a job at OpenAI, but OpenAI is not opening their doors until I give them secrets on the previous company that I was working with, which is Apple. And if I really want the job and I want to feed my friends, I want to feed my family and stuff, maybe friends, whatever, I gotta do what I gotta do. Especially if that's probably the only job opportunity that these employees have. I don't know. Could be a lot of stuff going on. I can only speculate.
So we're talking batteries, logic boards, prototypes, hardware samples for this show and tell aspect of maybe kind of convincing them, saying, hey, let me see what you've been working on at Apple to see if it's worth hiring you or not from a kind of skill set standpoint. But in reality, they just wanted all that Apple information. And again, this is a big no-no because all that stuff was not public information. It was part of Apple. It was part of their internal team. So bringing it over to a competitor's interview is a big no-no in pretty much any aspect.
To be honest with you guys, I can't see OpenAI superseding Apple when it comes to building consumer hardware. That's primarily because Apple's been excelling at that for a significant amount of time. And not only that, they've also been successful at integrating their own hardware and software seamlessly. So if OpenAI wants to gain any chance at superseding them, it's gonna take them several years. And there's a very real possibility they may never beat them.
And then in my opinion, the biggest headline here is that Apple is saying that their engineers were still downloading files even after leaving Apple. And Apple is alleging that former engineer Qiang Lu, they left Apple first, discovered he still had access because of the security bug. He didn't report that security bug, and then instead downloaded all that confidential information and engineering files and basically handed it all over to OpenAI.
I know for a fact we all have jobs, or we know what it's like to have a job. For me in the corporate world, when I quit a job, like the company removes all access to their work environment. But the keywords are they acted swiftly. Unlike Apple, it seems to me that they took their time. And now they're basically facing these consequences. Former Apple employees going over to OpenAI and giving all their secrets because they didn't basically remove their work access in a timely manner. Dang guys, that's cold.
And then another big one in my opinion, which is probably more in the background but still just as important, is that Apple says OpenAI targeted Apple suppliers. Now Apple's been building these supplier relations for about 50 years now, and they've had all this experience with them, and they probably have the best pricing and the best overall suppliers, and their SOPs are on point. And then Apple is alleging that OpenAI approached some of the same suppliers using confidential Apple information to try to get and kind of skip the line and skip all those 50 years of experience and work to get to the point that Apple is at. They're trying to skip all that and try to get all that confidential information.
You know the funny thing about those suppliers? At the end of the day, they are a business. To put it simple, let's say you were the landlord, right? And you had a tenant named Sam and a tenant named Mark. The tenant named Mark wants to live in Sam's place. But the thing about Sam, he always pays on time. He's been living in your building in that location for a significant amount of time and never gave you any problems when it came to payment. Mark, on the other hand, is shaky. He doesn't have a strong reputation like Sam. And that's the same exact thing when it comes to Apple and OpenAI. The supplier is gonna prioritize Apple because they are Sam. They've been paying them for a significant amount of time and have been having a good rapport with them. OpenAI, on the other hand, is like Mark. They're trying to take Sam's spot. You know what I'm saying? So you could prioritize them, but you don't know if they're gonna be here for a long time. You don't even know if they're gonna really deliver on payment like that compared to Sam, compared to Apple. That's how these suppliers look at it.
So at the end of the day, this wasn't about just the files that were taken. This is much bigger than that, because think about it. What has Apple learned over the last 20 years? They've learned which materials have failed, which suppliers are the best, which manufacturing practices and techniques work the best, how to make the products more enormous at scale. They already learned all that, and that's why they are a multi-trillion-dollar company and one of the biggest companies on the planet. And now OpenAI is just trying to weasel their way in there by taking all the information and all that hard work and getting to that point within a blink of an eye.
Here's a little wisdom for y'all. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have experience, it's gonna be very difficult to maximize your efforts because you wouldn't know what's optimal from what's not optimal. I'm not no Apple advocate, but Apple does have that experience that OpenAI doesn't. And unfortunately, you cannot buy experience. You have to live through it, through the ups and downs to gain it. Ain't no other way, guys.
And now I do want to quickly talk about what OpenAI's response was, because we have been talking mostly about Apple, but according to OpenAI's Director of Strategic Communications, Drew Pusateri, OpenAI has no interest in other companies' trade secrets and remains focused on building innovative technology that empowers people everywhere. Of course, that seems kind of just a layman's terms of saying we don't really want to mess with this publicly, we'll deal with this in courts. And it is mentioned that OpenAI didn't respond point by point to every allegation, but has made it clear that they dispute all of Apple's claims.
Of course, guys, if I accuse you of something, I guarantee you would do whatever it takes to dispute those accusations. The amount of time that I've been living on this earth, anybody that's been accused of something, they always resort to saying, nah, we didn't do that, or nah, I didn't do that. Just how the world works.
So again, this is all going to be settled in court. These are all allegations at first by Apple, but I do think that this is going to be one of the biggest AI battles of our time, because two giant companies, two giant behemoths. Again, one is heavily in debt, but technically worth billions and billions of dollars. And one has been around as a legacy company for over 50 years, was one of the most powerful companies on the planet, and has even more billions of dollars of cash to spend on a lawsuit. So I do think this is going to end pretty poorly for OpenAI. But again, this is all allegations, and I just hope it doesn't come to a settlement and something does actually happen from a consequence standpoint. And we'll see where the light ends up shining, because it just gives you a little bit of insight as to how these companies really battle each other for positioning as of being the top of the top when it comes to hardware and software.
I personally feel like OpenAI is going to face a lot of hardship when it comes to pursuing their hardware endeavors. They should have just went about it a different way. But for real though, guys, I got a question for y'all. What do you guys think the end result of all this will be? Are you on Apple's side or OpenAI's side? I'm just relaying the news. I don't really pick a side. But if you got anything you got to say, just say it in the comments, man. We can discuss it there. But until then, peace and love. I'll see y'all next time.